Welcome to the show Gold Squadron Gays. It's the podcast where two Star Wars loving gays talk about and review their favorite Star Wars content while also being gay as hell. I'm your host, Bradley Brower.
I'm your other host, Charles Rogers. And really quickly, before Bradley speaks, I have a thing that I need to point out. So, Bradley's audio is going to sound a little weird for a couple of weeks. And that is because he is currently in a hotel room. Now, previously on this show, we have teased that Bradley is traveling for work. But we were like, we could possibly say where he went or where he's going. We have to keep it this secret. This motherfucker posts that shit to Instagram the day he gets there. Bradley, what the fuck, man? I spent like 4 months being like, we can't talk about where Bradley's going. And then Bradley's like, look at this big island that I'm on.
You know, on the one hand, no one said I couldn't post to Instagram where I was physically located. On the other hand, you know what I mean? Like, so I guess technically I still have not broken any rules because I have not said out loud like any show titles or anything. I've just been like, I'm just traveling and I just happen to be in Hawaii. Like, it just happens that I am there.
Sure.
So there you go.
Well, because Bradley happens to be there, as you can hear, his sound is going to sound a little bit weird for a few weeks. We do apologize, but we want to keep making episodes of the show.
Of course.
Of course, even as we do it. Speaking of episodes of the show, I do have a new installment of The Thing Charles Fucked Up. On the last episode, I was listening back to it literally today, and I mentioned that Istalamaru is a main Phase 1 character. I say that he's a main Phase 1 character in the Old Republic. I think it was pretty clear that I meant High Republic based on the context, but just to be clear, Istalamaru, not from the Old Republic. Istalamaru from the High Republic Publishing Initiative.
Yeah.
Also, I have a little bit of follow-up because I did reach out to our friend Calvin over on First Steps of Star Wars podcast and got Calvin to ask Andy who Andy's favorite clone is. It's Cutla Quain, apparently.
Oh, interesting
Yes.
choice.
Yes. Which, you know, I should have known that as an avid listener of the show as I am. However, it does good to get our facts straight. So for anyone curious, Andy's favorite clone is apparently, as of time of this recording, Cutla Quain. And you should be listening to First Steps, a Star Wars podcast.
I just noticed I was scrolling on Instagram today and I noticed that they were also covering Bad Batch Season 3. So I was like, okay.
They are, at time of recording, they're doing it as it airs.
Right.
So they're switching places with us. Once again, we're just place switching.
I know. What
That's
is going
happening,
on?
like we were talking about in the Vamp intro, although in a much more horrible context. They are covering it as it airs. We are covering it like in retrospect because we wanted to finish Visions first.
Right.
But go check them out. They're doing the same episodes we are. They're not at the same time. All right, Bradley. Which one? Which one are we talking about? Which one are we talking about today? Which episode are we talking about, Bradley?
I'm assuming this is either one of your favorite or your favorite episode. Today,
It's my second favorite.
Your second favorite. Okay, I'm
So far.
excited to see.
We have one left to go.
And it's already your second favorite. Okay. Today we're talking about the Bad Batch Season 3, Episode 3, titled Shadows of Tantus, where Omega and Crosshair hatch a daring plan. Charles, what's one thing you liked about this episode and one thing you liked about this episode?
One thing I liked about this episode was the music and sound design for this episode was on point the entire time. Loved that. Everything from the silences to the eerie strings to how they employed all of it's not just the music, it's not just the Kiner's music, it's the sound design of the show. It's how it uses sound to unsettle you, to scare you, to prompt you, to feel certain ways or notify you of certain things. This show sounds incredible, and particularly this episode. One thing I really liked about this episode was the payoffs from episode 1, because we set up a lot in episode 1 that gets used in the escape in episode 3, and that's good writing. That's how you write a show like this that's serialized, that's very specifically serialized, is you set things up and then it pays off down the line. A lot that we saw in episode 1 comes up again in this episode, and it's really good because they work so well in tandem with each other, which I think is why episode 2 is so frustrating, because it breaks that up in a weird way. But we've already litigated that last week. Bradley, what was one thing you liked about this episode? And I'm sure you'll have a dislike.
Well, I always have a dislike because I'm practical. But
I can think of 1 or 2 times off the top of my head that you have not, and I think one of the Andor episodes I think one of the Andor episodes got away with with no dislikes.
I was gonna say, I wish we had someone who did a Wikipedia of our podcast, so like we could like just easily look this information up, instead of just guessing.
There are people over on the Divas podcast network. There are people that do actually have spreadsheets to track their counters on their show.
I would love someone to do that.
No one's
for us.
doing this for us, by the way. We're winging all of this. We're
Right.
ad-libbing all of this. I also know that over on First Steps, a Star Wars podcast, one of them, I think Wyatt keeps a spreadsheet. Wyatt or Calvin keeps a spreadsheet because they do D&D classes for characters in whatever they're watching. And one of them keeps a spreadsheet that they've been referencing to make sure they don't do the same character twice.
Well, let's see. One thing I
I
liked,
have
one thing I
stunned
didn't like.
Bradley
Sorry,
into
I was trying to like
silence.
get back to where I was like, what were you talking about again? Yeah. So one thing I liked, one thing I didn't like. One thing I liked about this episode was the whole episode. I mean, it was just from top to bottom. It was easily like a solid like A plus. Like it was so good. I enjoyed like the little bit of just like action it had, like all this stuff. Like it was just good all around. Like it made me so happy. And like I said last week, it would have been so nice to have it bookended with episode 1 because they were so sister episodes. It was great. I loved it so much. The only thing I didn't like about this episode was that it was connected to episode 1. I mean, that it was 3. I think that was what I didn't like about it, was that where its placement. I think I genuinely, because I can't think of something I don't genuinely like about the episode. I thought the pacing was good. I thought everything about it was nice. I was actually genuinely shocked that they got off Tantus. Like it was like I did not expect that at all. No, I was not expecting that, because if you want to be like jokingly about it, like you could have been like, well, the season's over. She got out of Tantus and she's gonna head back to the Bad Batch and the show's over and the end. Like, but
not
no.
to spoil the rest of the episode, the rest of the season, and have Bradley bleep it out again. Which was a funny little gag in episode 1 that I didn't realize he was going to do until I listened back. Omega escapes from Tantus will be a recurring plot point.
I was going to say, it's the current trend. But yeah, I thought overall...
It's the hot new thing. It's like that TikTok pop-up store that opened around the corner from me yesterday. It's the hot new thing that everyone's standing in line in the hot sun for hours to get access to.
That's such an LA thing. Like,
it's such an LA thing.
Oh, I
hate living here sometimes.
Oof.
I truly do. They blocked the door to my sandwich shop. I had to interact with a human person to ask them to move so I could get into the sandwich shop that I like.
Oh, gross.
I hate having to interact with people, Bradley. I don't want to talk to people. I don't want them to stand in front of the door to my coffee shop so that they can go to the TikTok pop-up. I know I promised to stay on topic, but you should know I was fucking lying when I promised that.
Fair enough. Section 1. We begin when Emery escorts Omega from her cell to work her shift at Tantus Base. Omega mentioned a heightened soldier presence around the base. Hemlock and Nala Se enter the room, and Hemlock informs them about an upcoming visitor, leading Hemlock to assign Emery to oversee Nala Se's laboratory. Nala Se anxiously observes Emery handling blood samples, including Omega's, for testing. Covertly, Nala Se warns Omega about the danger of Emery Carr testing her blood sample, urging her to escape the facility before it's too late. She instructs Omega to retrieve her datapad from the lab before departing with Hemlock. Omega enters the blood testing facility, questions Emery about the VIP visitor, but Emery dismisses her for the day. Then she discreetly steals the datapad and leaves.
There's a minor little scene right at the top of the episode. I just want to point it out here. They're in kind of this room. I don't know how to describe it. It's like a lot of circular walls ringing a central tower.
Okay.
And there's this guy standing at the base of the tower. It's one of the troopers that we saw in the last season, the clone assassins that were trying to kill Chuchi. And there's clones being led away from that tower. It's a random scene. It has no bearing on the overall episode, but I just want to point out that scene's there. Anyway, let's talk about Nala Se.
Okay.
Because Nala Se, when Nala Se finds out, like, that, I forget what triggers it. I think it's when they're like, oh, we're going to test the blood. And she realizes she's not going to be able to destroy the sample. And then she's like, oh, hey, Omega, you should leave. You should take the data pad and get the fuck out.
You should literally escape right now.
She could have done this the whole time.
The whole time. Yeah, I'm wondering why.
The
Like,
whole time.
I mean, I get it, but you know what I mean. It's for plot reasons, obviously.
Because she thought that Omega was safest close to her.
Right.
Because she doesn't know the batch and she doesn't trust the batch. It's the same reason that she let Omega go with the batch in the very first episode of the show. She wants Omega to be where Omega's going to be the safest. She thought it was going to be with the batch, away from Kamino. Then she thought it was going to be with her, so she withheld that there has been a plan for Omega to escape the whole time. She's a very selfish character. Like, selfishly selfless. Like, she cares about Omega, but she cares about Omega within the context of herself. And I think that's really interesting. I also think it's interesting how much the show accomplishes with very little dialogue to explain it. Like, there's a couple of things in the scene, like, particularly when Nalise's, like, trying to tell Omega about M-count replication, or M-count whatever. I did find it really interesting how economical the show's dialogue is. Because it doesn't do a lot of exposition.
No, everything's inferred in, like, every time they cut to the machine, you know, or they cut to whatever, like, you're just kind of like, you just have to assume that something scientifical is happening or things are happening that we don't understand.
It uses visual cues, and then particularly with Emery at this point as well. Like, Emery sort of giving these vague clues as to what she's about and stuff, and it's nobody's turning to the audience to say, pay attention, this will be important. They're just trusting that the audience will pick up on, like, the clues and remember it for later on. The show's really going to be interesting to watch this season streamed. Because even watching this season a second time with most of the episodes out, I'm like, oh, I see where this was going.
Right. They were hinting at a lot of stuff early on and you didn't notice that that's what they were doing. But, like, it's, like you said, it's just good writing. Everything just kind of calls back to something later on that we're going to have to deal with. I think it was like, you know, when we get to Emery's episode, it's very similar in that, like, I think in this, I noticed that she calls Hemlock, like, to Omega or whatever, she calls him the doctor. She doesn't even call him Hemlock.
Yep.
She just says the doctor. So it's, like, very, like, formal, like, almost like, I don't know. It's just weird. Like, clearly they work together or, like, they have some kind of special connection, but, like, she just refers to him as the doctor. Like, and it shows that Emery is, like, not as connected to Hemlock as we would like to think she is. Like, she presents as, like, his sidekick or, like, kind of like his little lackey kind of thing, but clearly we're getting the idea that she is more than meets the eye. There's something there, like
there's a disconnect there.
Yeah.
But she's clearly very attached to Hemlock, but he's got her kind of at arm's length. She has some line, I think it's in this episode, that's like, the doctor will tell me, you know, if I need to know.
If I need to know, yeah. That's what I mean. Yeah. When she was talking about that, it was kind of like, so you're not really that connected as we would think you would be. Like, or like, he doesn't tell you anything. Like, he only tells her pertinent information. Like, he doesn't tell her anything else. Like, and that's
right. So. And I also think it's interesting that on the flip side of that she really clearly cares very much about Omega in her own way. You know, Nalise might believe that she's the only person there that really cares, but Emery also does care about Omega a lot. And I think that's evidenced of, like, when Omega's like, hey, I'm sick, and Emery's like, okay, well, then go back to your cell. Don't worry about it. I'll take care of your stuff for the day.
Right.
Like,
because if she was just like a prisoner, then that wouldn't
be
something
like,
Emery would
fuck
care
you,
about.
work.
Yeah.
Are you like dying, actively dying? No? Okay, then get back to work. What kind of horrible workplace, Bradley, would make you come in while you were sick?
I don't know.
And work you to the bone. Every fucking job I've ever had.
Right.
Except my current one, I got COVID last year, and they were like, no, you're staying home until you're tested.
Yeah, they're like, please don't come in.
Please don't come in. And I'm like, but also if I get the sniffles, they'll be like, please don't come in.
Right.
Please, please stay at home.
When I was writing this, my script thing or whatever, I at first I had written it like, Omega seemed like sick or whatever, so Emery sends her home. But I was like, if you actually watch the episode, like, Emery immediately is just like, are you feeling okay? Like, you seem weird. Like, you just not acting like yourself. Just take the day off. Like, she just doesn't even, like, she doesn't test her. She doesn't do anything where she's like, let me see if you're actually sick. She's just like, tells
I trust you.
Yeah, she just trusts her.
I love Emery Carr. Emery Carr has emerged as, like, a standout character for me.
Yeah.
In this season, which is weird because she comes the fuck out of nowhere at the end of season 2, drops a bombshell, and we're like, who the fuck is this woman? Why is she here? And she's quickly become one of my favorite characters in the show. Yes, I would be remiss if I did not address that the second they put Omega's blood in the circular thing, it is now a literal ticking clock.
Right. I like it. It's literally counting down like the escape.
Great visual metaphor, guys. Ticking clock.
Yeah, her time is running out.
Her time is running out.
Right. She's got to get out. Section 2. A shuttle exits hyperspace, arriving at the Wayland facility, where Hemlock greets Emperor Palpatine and discusses their progress, specifically mentioning Project Necromancer, leading them to a glowing red chamber.
Bradley, who's our guest star for this episode?
Ben Burt is. I'm just kidding. I'm just making up something. No, Ian McDermott is reprising his role as Palpy.
Yes. Ian McDermott is back. You know who Ian McDermott is. If you've listened to our season 2 episodes, you know who Ian McDermott is. If you've watched a Star Wars movie, there's a good chance, there's at least a 50% chance he's in that movie.
That's true.
Is there a 50%? He's in, let's see, the 3 prequels, Empire,
the only one he's not in.
There's a slightly over 50% chance.
Yeah, because he's in almost every single one, right?
Yeah, there's a slightly over 50% chance Ian McDermott has appeared in that movie.
Right, because somehow he returned in one, and then another one. I'm just kidding.
You were waiting for me to react to that joke, but I'm immune to them now because they've happened on the internet so fucking much.
But I also love that joke. I don't know why people...
Unironically, if you're just pointing out that the line is kind of stupid, like, and also wonkily delivered, I love that joke. If you're trying to use it as evidence that that's a bad movie, I'm like, buddy, they give you the answer in the next 2 lines of dialogue. Like, come on. I love the ongoing memification of the early Disney era. I'm delighted to see that.
Right.
Speaking of lines of dialogue, setting things up for later, Hemlock does mention that the facility allows for, quote, testing of much larger assets.
When I saw that, in my brain, my brain started firing off. I was like, we know what they're talking about. We know what they're talking about.
I wonder what's going on here. You know what else they're talking about, Bradley? Project Necromancer.
So this is what you were talking about earlier.
This is what I was talking about earlier when Bradley bleeped out. We do get our first mention in the Bad Batch of Project Necromancer. Project Necromancer, as we know, will be resurrected by the Imperial Remnant and the First Order, and will probably eventually lead to the somehow Palpatine returned.
I love it.
But this is, if you're looking in order, it's the first time it's identified as Project Necromancer.
Got it.
It was ongoing during the Clone Wars with the Children of the Force episodes, but it's not named Project Necromancer at that point. Now it's named Project Necromancer.
I'm trying to remember, is that one of the things they mentioned in Rogue One or no? Or am I misremembering?
You are misremembering. They mention it in The Mandalorian. Let me see what else they mention in, and this is the thing Charles did not research.
Because I know that in Rogue One it was Stardust and...
hyperspace tracking got mentioned in Rogue One. Something called Project Darksaber.
Darksaber, Stardust, and there was one more, right? Oh, the main one, right? Like whatever.
Well, Stardust is the main one.
Stardust is the main one, yeah.
But it's hyperspace tracking, Darksaber, and I don't remember. Project Necromancer, first mentioned in The Mandalorian episode... Season 3, episode 7, I want to say.
Was that the one that was right before Rise of Skywalker came out?
No, this is season 3.
Oh. I'm trying to remember. What did they not mention? No, they just did like the healing.
Force healing.
Force
healing showed up in The Mandalorian right before it showed up in Rise of Skywalker. And everybody was mad when it happened in Rise of Skywalker because a girl did it.
Right, but when a baby did it, it was fine.
But when a baby alien does it, it's fine.
When a girl does it, alien Yoda did it, it was fine.
But you see, Grogu's a boy, so it's okay that he pulls random force powers out of his ass.
You're right, yeah, because he's a boy.
Because he's a boy. That's how it works. This is the genesis of Project Necromancer as it will ultimately appear further down the line.
Section 3. Omega uses the datapad to access a turbolift, proceeding to the detention block to talk to Crosshair. She convinces him to distract some stormtroopers while she unlocks his cell. Omega reveals Nalase's instructions to escape. Crosshair expresses doubts about their escape prospects when he overhears that the Emperor is on site. Omega notices Crosshair's shaking hand, but he disregards her worries and after discovering that all shuttles at the Wayland facility are grounded, she plans to use the comms on a downed shuttle that crashed earlier to contact Hunter and Wrecker.
Hunker.
Hunker.
He's a hunker.
He's a hunker.
I would be remiss if I did not mention the "fuck you, mouse droid" bit.
Yes, I love
Very
whenever
funny.
they do that. That is one of the funniest bits in Star Wars. Just like fuck the mouse droid. Yeah,
it goes all the way back to New Hope. It's literally in A New Hope.
Yep, I love it.
It's one of the oldest Star Wars gags. Fuck the mouse droids.
I just like it's funny though that she like literally kicks it. She's like, "No, get out!
No, fuck off!"
It was so funny.
Omega and Crosshair's dynamic is just legendary. Like, heart and soul of this season is the dynamic between those two.
I almost wish we could have gotten like a whole season of just them together. Like, how cool would that have been? Like,
it could have carried. It's a little frustrating we're getting it now, but we have had hints of it through the seasons. And also, like, she really needed to build that relationship with Wrecker and Hunter throughout the first two seasons. So their relationship is very solidified by this season, and Crosshair is the new one.
I guess that's why these episodes. Oh, I was gonna say this is why these episodes are probably so strong, is because you're right. They have already solidified their relationship, and they kind of sidelined Crosshair basically the whole first season, so that we never really
first and second seasons.
Yeah, so it was like they were kind of like fuck him, and then now that we're getting this relationship with her, like it's so strong. Every episode that they do together, it's just like wow, they're making up for all those times.
I also don't think she could have related to her brother as like on the level that they relate to each other if she had not grown up over the course of two seasons.
Right.
I think she had a very, very childish mentality in the first season, which made sense because she's a child. But by this season, she's grown up enough that she's able to relate to Crosshair, because Crosshair is not going to mince words with her. He's going to treat her like a tiny adult. And we'll see it particularly next week. And then he's like, here, child, have a gun. And gives her a fucking gun.
Who doesn't love that? We love,
that's my favorite part.
Children having guns on Disney.
That's the heart of Star Wars. Give children a blaster rifle.
Yeah, I guess it's okay because it's
he literally just tosses. He literally just tosses the blaster rifle at her. He's like, "Here you go nuts." I thought that was really funny.
I guess the Bad Batch has taught her, enough.
They've taught her how to shoot.
Yeah,
no, to be clear, she is trained with that.
That's
firearm.
true. She is trained with.
She knows how to use it. She is trained with firearms. She has the proper training. Exactly. She is supervised by an adult. Like it makes sense in context for him to toss her this loaded firearm. However, he is tossing a child a blaster.
Sure.
Which she will use.
I love it.
Later on in the episode. I also love the way that Crosshair says the line, "The Emperor's here." Like, yeah, Crosshair, obviously she picked the worst time to try to escape. Have you met Omega?
Also, like, what other time are we going to choose to escape? We can't just escape on a Sunday. Like, we have to escape on the day that the Emperor decided to show up to work. Like, when the biggest boss, like, the head of the company comes to the job, like, that's when we choose to fuck around. Like,
exactly. You do bullshit when the CEO's in town.
Exactly.
That's what you do.
Naturally.
I also love Crosshair's stubborn refusal to deal with his hand popping up this early in the season, because that's going to keep coming up. The fact that his hand is shaking. My final note for this section, because I really thought that briefly this was where the plot of the episode was going to go, and I just have to call it out. The moment Omega's like, well, there's one shuttle that's not grounded. The Emperor's. We should steal the Emperor's shuttle.
It's like, ma'am, no,
ma'am,
we're not doing that. We are not going to steal the Emperor's shuttle, the only shuttle, and probably the whole entire base that's probably either A, heavily guarded, and then B.
Nope, Omega's just like, we're gonna steal the Emperor's shuttle. Fun adventure time. Crosshair's like, are you fucking kidding me? We are not doing this.
Section 4. Inside the Tantus Vault, Hemlock displays various specimens stored in special tanks to Palpatine, expressing hope for the successful M-Count replication. Meanwhile, Emery discovers Omega's empty cell, while Omega and Crosshair break into the Lurka Hound kennels, planning to use a tunnel to escape. When they are confronted by Emery, she calls for backup before being stunned. Before departing, the Emperor cautions Hemlock to maintain secrecy and security at the Wayland facility, while Hemlock shares his ambition to become scientific minister. After the Emperor departs, Scorch notifies Hemlock of Omega and Crosshair's disappearance, and Omega narrowly evades the ray shields as they get outside. Emery informs Hemlock that Omega escaped using a datapad, prompting Hemlock to dispatch Lurka hounds and patrols to track them down.
There's a lot in this section.
Yeah, it's a pretty heavy section.
So we get these like weird Sith pods that kind of look like the fucking pods on Malachor or some shit. Like it's that weird, creepy like vibe. What do we think is in those pods?
I'm guessing this is
Because
Snoke.
we have no answer.
I'm guessing Snoke. That's my guess. Like a very early version of Snoke.
Because all we know is that whatever's in there, Hemlock is keeping them like very well preserved. Do we think it's clones of the Emperor?
That's what I was thinking. Oh, you mean like direct clones? Like
I think it's direct clones
bodies,
of the Emperor.
I think so. I think you're right. I think then, yeah, maybe not Snoke, because Snoke was like a different situation. This is more like we want to see how well the blood bonds with like an actual physical clone. You're right. So I think these are just
Well, they mentioned too.
Yeah.
In episode 1, I think Nala Se and Hemlock have their conversation where they're talking about doing a success. So they're cloning something, and something's in those pods. Now, the real answer is that they're probably clones of the Emperor. He's probably doing a Dark Empire this early.
Gotcha. Well, what if it's... Okay,
I will be bringing up Dark Empire a lot.
So it could be his clones, but what if it's just like generic empty clones?
So,
like,
fun fact, remember how episode 1 I mentioned I have a truly horrifying theory that they will not do, but is super fucked up?
Yeah.
I wonder if it's clones of those Force kids.
Oh, yeah, like the ones that are...
That would be messed up.
Oh, that could be possible.
I mean, they won't do it.
Right.
Because, like, that is genuinely one of the most horrifying things you could possibly do.
Right.
I think it's clones of the Emperor.
I think so. Because I feel like they're never going to show us whatever it is. And so
they may also just never show us what's in those pods.
I think they're never going to show us. So it's just implied. I'm guessing that it's Palpatine clones. And then, eventually one of them is going to be like, I'm going to have a kid. And what's funny is like Rey.
What's funny is like by the time listeners get to this episode, we will know whether or not they answered what's in the pods.
Oh, that's true.
Because the finale is literally in 2 days as of recording this.
Oh yeah, so we can suspend our disbelief right now, like that we don't know anything up until this point. We
definitely don't know when we actually do not know how this show ends at this point.
Exactly.
I'm elated that next week we will fucking know how the show ends.
I know. It'll shape the way I tell this review of every other episode.
That's true. I'm kind of glad we're getting to Shadows of Tantus before that happened.
Right.
Because it was not a given that we were going to record this weekend. And we're not recording next weekend because it's the height of our power, Bradley. We're ascendant. We're going to be insufferable. Are they doing the showings near you? The Phantom Menace showings? Did you get
I haven't checked. I found the theater, the one theater on the island. So I'm going to check to make sure that, because I just drove past it. I didn't look to see if they were actually playing anything. So I need to check first to make sure they're actually doing Phantom Menace so I can get all the little PAs to come with me and go watch this movie so we can make it like a group thing.
Did you ever watch 30 Rock, Bradley?
I've never seen it. I mean, I've seen like episodes, but I've never like watched it all the way through.
There's an episode of 30 Rock where Liz Lemon, who's Tina Fey's character on the show, has like a party, and she basically forces all of her staff members to attend the party because she wants more guests, and she's like, actually, this is mandatory group time. I love that. Speaking of people who would probably be terrible bosses, actually, her status as a boss is debatable when she gets with Helen Sadler's character later on in the season. We'll get to that when we get to it. I love the scene of Emery walking into Omega's room and just being like, God damn it.
Right. Just like, not again.
But I also find it fascinating the way Emery's like, because Emery shows up to try to stop them at the kennel. And it's really interesting because she's trying to support the upkeep of the system while showing empathy for people within that system. And it's not working. And the reason it's not working is because the system overall is designed for cruelty. It is designed to eliminate that sort of empathy or care for other people. That is how it's set up. You cannot both support the system and also care about other people. You can't do both. But Star Wars isn't political.
Oh, there it is.
There's nothing political about this, Bradley. No points are being made about the system here.
Right.
I also want to note very specifically, there's a moment you can tell that Crosshair was definitely going to shoot Imri. He was about to straight up kill her. And there is a moment where you can tell he toggles the blaster to stun. And I think it's when Omega says that she's a clone.
Oh, I didn't catch that.
And he flips the blaster to stun.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah,
because remember, the thing with the batches, they will just shoot a motherfucker if they're a stormtrooper, but they will stun clones.
Yeah, you have to have. They're almost like anti-heroes. Like they have a code. Like there's like always like a rule that they have to follow. Like they're not necessarily the good guys in a sense, but they're also not the bad guys because they're not gonna, they follow. They're like Batman. Like he does certain things, but he won't cross a line.
Right. The clones like believe that other clones can be saved, and so they try to avoid killing them.
Right.
And I do think it's just a small indicator of Crosshair kind of coming back to the light that he could have easily shot Imri Carr. He does not. When he finds out she's a clone, he toggles the blaster. I think that's the line where he turns that off. But either way, Omega convinces him to do it. We got this scene with the Emperor and Hemlock. I fucking love this scene.
Why? Because he talks about science, or is because he's like?
Because the Emperor comes out the gate, right? It's a masterclass in the Emperor manipulating this guy. Because the Emperor comes right out the gate, and he's like, he negs Hemlock, which is so funny. He's like, there's other people, even within the Empire, that think that your work is an abomination, but not me.
Right.
I really respect what you're doing here. Not like those other guys who don't like you and think you're weird and creepy and gross and hang out in your mountain. No, we understand each other. And then Hemlock's like trying to do it, like, but he's so bad. He's like nowhere close to Palpatine.
Right. Like
he's not even in the same league as Palpatine. And he's like, well, if I were the Minister of Science or whatever, I could do this. And Palpatine's like, yeah, we'll talk about it.
He's like, I think what's funny about that too is like he knows that like if he were to ever do that, it's not like Palpatine's not stupid, right? Like he knows that on the one hand he wants to do his evilly shadowy stuff, but on the other hand he's like, well, I have to keep this facade of like the Senate or things that are important, that even though they're not really in power or whatever, we still have to keep the facade that they are in power. So like having a crazy scientist, guy being the head of the science ministry, or like this guy who does bad stuff like bringing things back to life or cloning or whatever, people would not like that. Like, and it's causing more problems for you if you do that.
Somebody like Orson Krennic is palatable.
Right.
Somebody like Orson Krennic is safe. You can put him in front of the Senate and he'll be fine. Or you could take him out and it's also fine, just like they did to Rampart. So it's just funny how good Palpatine is at just making Hemlock dance on his little puppet strings in this scene. Again, the show accomplishes so much with so little dialogue. And then, of course, we get Hemlock immediately trying to fucking murder Omega and Crosshair when he finds out they've escaped. Because this is a thing about pissy little fascists. Is when their pride gets wounded, when, say, someone manages to escape when the Emperor is there, nah, fuck it, kill him. Because that hurts their little feelings. It hurts their precious little Imperial feelings for someone to manage to get away with that ship.
I feel like it would have been funnier if they were on Palpatine's ship when they took off.
Well, the problem with that is that Palpatine isn't stupid.
Well, he would immediately know they were on. So.
He would immediately know they were on the ship.
Yeah.
2, Palpatine's not going to do this whole little send out the lurker hounds and close the gates and yada 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 murder. Or he's just going to yank the ship back. Or he's going to blow it up. He's not got time for this.
Section 5. Stormtroopers are sent to track down the fugitives as Omega uses the datapad to navigate through the jungle and find the downed shuttle, only to discover its communication systems are non-functional. As a ship approaches their location, Crosshair enacts Plan 77 and engages the troopers, and Omega is cornered by a stormtrooper, but is saved by the Lurkahound Batcher, who attacks the trooper, allowing Omega to stun them. Crosshair deals with the other troopers, while Omega stuns a shuttle's pilot and fires at the stormtroopers with the ship's weapons, providing covering fire for Crosshair to board and take control of the shuttle.
I love the faith that Crosshair has in Omega, because at the end of the day, he's questioning her every step of the way, but when she's at her darkest moment, I think it's important that even though Crosshair is constantly questioning what Omega's doing, when it matters most, when she's at her lowest point, he reminds her that she did in fact get them this far.
Right.
So he's no longer, and this is an important thing in Crosshair's development, he's no longer just focusing on what she did wrong in the way that we saw him all the way back in Aftermath when he was criticizing Hunter. He was hyper focused on what Hunter was doing wrong. And here, even though he's kind of doing the same thing with Omega, he's grown and he's acknowledging too there were things she did right. And she did get them out of Tantus.
Yeah, I just like how in the beginning of the episode, he was kind of like, no, we can't do that. Like, escape doesn't make sense. Like, we can't try that. And then now he's at the point where, well, we've gotten this far. So she's doing something correct because he in some way, in his own way, he trusts her now. I don't know if he's like said it out loud, but he's like definitely like you can tell that like he's like, well, shit, we're already outside in the jungle, so she's doing something right. Like I believe her, like, and I follow her. She's like a natural leader, I guess somehow. Like she just like that's just part of her. I know it's not her like mutation. That's not like she doesn't have like a mutation of natural leadership, but she seems to like have the best parts of the Bad Batch, right? Like that's kind of what we can consider her mutation is that she takes the best parts of people and puts it in herself, right?
It's the power of family.
The power of love. It's
the power of love and raising a child correctly.
Of course.
I do like the little conversation they have about tech, where I will say it does have an asterisk on it that we'll get to. But I do love the little moment where she's like, yeah, Tech had me memorize all the plans. And Crosshair's like, of course he did. Because it's a very human expression of remembering someone. To where something will just sort of jog your memory of them. And you'll be like, oh, you know, X used to really love Y. And you'll remember them for a minute and then you'll move on. And I like that. I like that they, in this conversation, Omega makes the conscious point to bring up that it was Tech that had her memorize the plans. And then Crosshair's little, you know, of course he did. Like, yeah, because they knew Tech very well. That does get an asterisk because I do kind of wish we'd maybe seen Crosshair find out that Tech was dead on screen.
Right, because now we just kind of have to infer he just found out.
Now we kind of have to infer. And this is the first of those frustrating conversations that are going to happen. They're not all centered around Tech. There's a really frustrating one later on in the season that's a dramatic moment that's set up that's resolved completely off screen. But this is the first of many conversations where it's going to be obvious that a moment where Crosshair found out Tech died occurred off screen and we didn't get to see it. What we have is a very beautiful expression of like remembrance, but we are missing that crucial scene from earlier on. I do love that the show is peppering in these little bits about Tech, like reminding us basically that he's not there and that his absence is being felt and that he's being remembered. On the flip side, I do wish we maybe could have seen Crosshair start to come to terms with that. Like that would have hit harder. The show is missing, it's missing scenes is the problem.
Yeah, we didn't have like a Tech funeral, if that makes
sense. We didn't need a whole funeral for Tech.
But I mean like I'm calling it a funeral, but we didn't have a come to like gather.
Well, we haven't had a moment. We haven't had a moment to mourn, and I do think if we were going to have a scene, right? We don't need necessarily to have a scene where we acknowledge it. We do get a scene that's kind of like a Tech being laid to rest scene way later in the season.
Right, with the
it needed to come sooner. It does end up happening, and it's just for Omega. And it needed to happen sooner, and it needed to include more characters. Omega has a dog now.
Yes, finally.
We're going from dramatic scene, really talking about how this storyline was handled, to Omega has a puppy.
I love that. I think they've always needed a dog. They've always needed like a creature. Like they've kind of hinted a little bit. I think it was in the first season with Roland's like creature thing that she kind of like
Ruby
that she was like babysitting for a while. Like she, I feel like
she's pretty good with animals.
Yeah, we know that that's usually a red flag. That someone is good with animals is always a red flag in Star Wars.
That is a red flag in Star Wars.
That means something more, even though I don't think that that's what we're going with this time around. I think
they subverted it.
Yeah.
I think she just is good with animals. She's good with the Rancor in season 1. She rides the Rancor in season 1.
Yeah, I wonder if they should bring back that baby Rancor.
Where is that baby Rancor? Like, oh my god, if they show up to Tantus with a Rancor, I will
like, remember
forgive
this?
every problem I have with this show.
Remember this thing that happened? Yeah, guess what? Here it is.
Yeah, Batcher's officially joining the cast
I
of
like
the
it.
Bad Batch, which is cool. I also do like, remember we talked earlier about like the stun versus shoot thing? So I like how she like stuns the first trooper, and then when she realizes that all the troopers are like TK soldiers, she gets in the shuttle, right? I love this. She gets in the shuttle and just starts blasting them with the shuttle cannons. And then, when she and Crosshair switch places and she's firing at them again, she's using blaster bolts.
Oh, I didn't really catch that the first time. That's
She's yeah. One, she shoots them with the ship,
right.
and
Well,
then
that's
she's
already
actually
yeah.
firing live rounds at them.
I was gonna say I would have found the ship shooting at them shocking if not for Ezra desensitizing me in Rebels to him literally murdering people in ships. So I don't really necessarily think that that's that
What
big of
is
a deal.
Star Wars if not children killing fascists with blasters?
Blasters, yeah.
With ships, usually ships.
Usually a ship,
the
yeah.
children are killing fascists with ships, and the adults are killing them with blasters.
But at
That
least
tends
like
to be how this works.
at least though, like within Rebels, like it was like within the confines of like the vacuum of space. So like it was really who's the real villain? It's space, obviously. Like it's not
Space
necessarily
is the real
Ezra
villain.
blowing them up. It was him exploding the ship, sure, but then it was space doing the dirty work for him.
Look, if Star Wars would slow down for 5 fucking minutes, it would slow down. We could cover Rebels, Resistance, one of these other shows.
Hammer
We
Ezra
can't.
kill count.
I was just talking today about how I would like us to do the original trilogy at some point.
Right. But we're too much of Disney fans and we don't like the
Yes,
original trilogy.
I
We
hate
only like
everything
the
prior
Disney.
to 2015. I definitely did not fully attend and was a panelist at a con about
Oh,
Star Wars
Legends.
Legends. I am definitely not clued into, many friends of mine who are also fans of Star Wars Legends. I am not a number one Legends defender who has produced multiple Legends episodes of this podcast because he enjoys it so much. No, nothing before 2015 counts.
I agree.
And the movies didn't start counting until they released the From a Certain Point of View adaptations.
Oh my God.
And Phantom Menace only gets to count because it's basically the back half of Queen's Peril.
There you go.
So, Attack of the Clones, Revenge of the Sith, y'all don't count. Oh no, they have been adapted into Lego Star Wars The Skywalker Saga, so I guess they
Oh
can
my
kind of get away with it.
God. Section 6. Back at the lab, Emery is testing the blood samples when she gets a positive alert. The Wayland facility is alerted that the fugitives have hijacked a shuttle, prompting starfighters to pursue them. Hemlock wants to shoot them down. However, Emery runs in to inform Hemlock of Omega's positive M count transfer, leading Hemlock to order the pursuit to stand down with the goal of capturing Omega alive. Omega and Crosshair escape into hyperspace, and Hemlock dismisses their escape as a minor setback and vows to find them with the full resources of the Empire.
Just love how this guy's like, do I want a promotion or do I want to kill people? A promotion would let me kill more people. I think I'll go with that one because I suck really hard.
Although, what I find funny about that, you say that, like, you're like, oh, if I kill her, then, like, whatever. But, like, at the end of the day, we know that we don't know how this show ends, right? But we know that, like, if he had not just killed her here, all of his problems would probably be solved, right? Like, yes, he probably wouldn't have found the solution to cloning or whatever it is that the Empire wants, but he would have probably saved his own life in the end because I have a theory that he's probably not going to make it to the end of the season.
I don't think so. And regrettably, I do not think that he's going to go out the way that his real life counterpart did, which is what I want for him. But we'll see. I'm not even going to bother speculating because by the time people listen to this episode, we'll know.
Right.
I also just want to shout out the animation. Emery's face animation is really good. Like, the final shot of her when she's going through, like, this facial journey is incredible. Stunningly good.
Beautiful.
Shout out to that. That's all my notes. Bradley, do you have anything else before we move on to final thoughts?
No, I just have final thoughts, really.
Okay. What are your final thoughts on this episode, Bradley?
My final thoughts are, God, I wish this was the premiere. And God, this was such a good premiere. Like, because technically it was. Let's be real for a second. Wait. So it wasn't, in a sense, the premiere as if it wasn't connected to 1 and 2, or like 1 by itself, which I would have preferred. However, technically we got all 3 of these episodes on the same day. So this was a true premiere. I mean, like, this was a good premiere, like, because it was all 3 episodes. So I will give them that it was a really awesome premiere, because we got all these 3 episodes so far that they were pretty genuinely good. With this one being the final one that we had to wait a whole week after to get the next one, this was a good way to end it. I mean, because to be fair, we thought that this was not going to happen this early in the season.
We were very surprised when I remember messaging you and being like, what?
I'll be like, is the season over? Like, what's happening?
What's happening? Yeah. And without wishing to get into it too much, where they end up going in this season is pretty interesting.
Yeah.
How they end up playing this. My final thought is, I love when Star Wars is good. I like when it's just good. Like, I got nothing else. It's fantastic, and the only episode thus far that has been like topped this episode for me is Identity Crisis.
Oh,
like okay. That's the only one doing better than this one for me.
And to be fair, that one's I would say the unofficial sequel to this episode.
Right? They all work together.
Well, actually, not really, because the next one is really the next episode, but the one after that, maybe. I don't know. Like,
it's interesting because the season is so well paced and structured, except when it's not.
Right.
And there are points where it will not be. And there were points where I'm not sure if it was or not, because I couldn't fucking see anything. I swear, their solution to me spending the entire last season going, whose goddamn white baby is that, is to just make it so dark I can't see anybody.
Right.
That's how they got it. That's how they got me to stop doing that bit every episode. Is they just made it, you can't see anybody, you're good. Okay. We'll get to the dark thing later on, the darkness of these episodes. Alrighty, next week, episode 4. What's episode 4 called, Bradley?
A Different Approach.
A Different Approach. Pluggables. Bradley does a bunch of reality TV, and you can find it on Peacock and Bravo. We are currently promoting The Circle on Netflix. We are currently promoting season 6 of The Circle, which Bradley worked on. You can find me on the Star Wars TTRPG podcast For Light and Dice. I am on that with a bunch of very cool content creators. And that is awesome. I also write series of gay thriller novels on Kindle Unlimited set in a porn studio called Beach House Studios, which Bradley has now finished the first book.
I know, I'm so excited.
If you were following the journey, I'm excited for you to be done with it. Just in time for 2 to be a couple of months away.
I was gonna say, here, let me tell my story real quick of how I finished it, because I don't want to waste too much time at the end of this episode. But
okay,
I was literally, guys, I was on, like, in line boarding the plane, and I only had 2 chapters left, and I was like, I don't want to, like, not finish the book and then not have internet to talk to Charles for a second to tell him how I feel about it. And I was like, fuck. Like, and I kept trying to read as fast as I possibly could. And like, I barely finished it before we took off. So I thought it was really funny.
Yes. Which I guess does somewhat match the pacing of those final 2 chapters. Because there's a lot that happens in...
Anyway, this is not a Beach House Studios podcast, but
this is not.
Maybe we'll have to do a special episode or something where we talk about your book, because...
Maybe we get further in, but I'm going to keep plugging it. But for the listeners who are following the journey, Bradley has finished the first book.
Finally.
And he will get the second one early and finish it after everyone else does, because he reads them very slowly. Anyway, that was an extended digression, and we'll see how much of that Bradley keeps in the episode. But for now, we... like Omega and Crosshair, and indeed, like the very bit that I did in episode 1, are gonna run away by running the socials. Thank you for listening to this episode of Gold Squadron Gaze. Did Charles fuck something up? Email us at goldsquadrongaze@gmail.com to let us know. You can also find us on Twitter at @GoldSquadGaze, and you can find us on TikTok and Instagram at @GoldSquadronGaze. You can also find us on YouTube at our Gold Squadron Gaze YouTube channel, where we post full episodes of this show. Finally, if you liked the show, don't forget to rate us and give us a review on your favorite podcast platform. That allows other people to find our show. As always, thank you for listening to Gold Squadron Gaze, and we'll see you next week.
Welcome to the show, Gaze, Gaze, Gaze. I'm in Hawaii. Ha ha ha. Charles is stuck 6 hours ahead of me. Or no, actually, you're only 3
I'm only 3 hours ahead of you, motherfucker.
But my body
switched
is
places.
not.
We switched places. This is the The versatility of the podcast here is we've reversed places.
Exactly.
And neither of us like it. I don't like this.